It's Bullseye. I'm Jesse Thorn. Next up, Jonathan Katz. You know Jonathan, you know him from his animated TV series, Dr. Katz Professional Therapist. It aired on Comedy Central in the late 1990s, and it was one of the strangest animated shows on television at the time. It was mostly Dr. Katz, played by Jonathan, a big city shrink with a rotating clientele of comedians and actors who basically just sat on his couch and squiggled and did material from their acts. Katz was supported by his son Ben, played by H. John Benjamin, and Laura, his secretary, played by Laura Silverman. It was a hilarious show, kind of a brilliant conceit. Every comedian who'd sit in with Katz would give him what was essentially an intimate, one-on-one version of their act. We've all heard the cliche that stand-up is therapy for comics. Well, Dr. Katz took that idea as literally as it possibly could. Here's Mitch Hedberg on the show back in the 90s.
Is there a history of mental illness in your family?
No, just a history of drinking and getting mad at people for drinking. Alcoholism is a disease, but it's the only disease that you can get yelled at for having.
Mm-hmm.
Damn it, Otto, you're an alcoholic. Damn it, Otto, you have lupus. One of those two doesn't sound right.
Yeah, tell me about your parents, Mitch, if you can.
My dad used to be into coin collecting, which was cool because I was into video games. And then he got into stamp collecting, and I got into mailing things.
Mm-hmm.
I had a bag of Fritos once. They were Texas grill Fritos.
Right.
These Fritos had grill marks on them. Hell yeah. Reminds me of summer when we used to fire up the barbecue and throw down on some Fritos. I can still see my dad with the apron on. You better flip that Frito, Dad. You know how I like it.
Dr. Katz went off the air in 1999. And since then, Katz has kept writing, doing stand-up, and working behind the scenes, too. He was also diagnosed with multiple sclerosis about 20 years ago, and although he didn't at first, he now speaks very frankly about his disease. Now Dr. Katz is back. Jonathan just released a brand new series on Audible called Dr. Katz, The Audio Files. Laura Silverman and John Benjamin are back. It's got a whole new lineup of comedians and actors on the couch, including old favorites like Sarah Silverman, Ray Romano, and Andy Kindler. Jonathan Katz, welcome to Bullseye. It's great to have you on the show.
Oh, thank you for asking.
I did not know until today, and I've spoken to you a number of times, that you were a champion ping pong player.
New York State champion, 1964. I wish I could say that with more humility.
You are like an inveterate recorder of things, right? Like at home?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've been recording things since I was about 7 years old, and my dad came home with a reel-to-reel machine.
What kind of things did you record when you were a kid?
Well, it would range from things in Mad Magazine. My cousin Paul and I would read Mad Magazine, and we make up our own sketches. And we had a band called the Cousins.
You thought you were going to be a musician initially, right?
I did, and I still do. I still think I'm going to write a hit song before this conversation is over.
I have a song that you wrote here. It's called This Heart is Closed for Alterations. Can you tell me where this song came from?
Well, it's a song I wrote with David Mamet. And it came from, well, you know, I was a very dramatic young man. I was rejected by women in so many songs, it's depressing. Not in real life, but just in my music, I was rejected.
Exclusively?
Yeah.
Well, let's take a listen to, this is actually from Mork and Mindy, so it's Robin Williams, with whom you worked for a while.
Right.
As Mork from Mork and Mindy, rainbow suspenders and all, in a country band, singing a song that my guest Jonathan Katz wrote with his friend, legendary playwright, David Mamet.
This heart is closed for alterations, and the management extends apologies. I'm sorry if I've inconvenienced you. I'll make it right before I'm through. But for a little while, just bear with
this heart is closed
for alteration. So please excuse the rubble and debris. You see, I've reached a few decisions and I made a few revisions. I think we'll make a new man out of me.
Gizbom, was er doet hem.
I don't know if you wrote the part where he talks in an alien voice.
No. It was all him. But, touring with him for almost a year was really exciting. And he was red hot because of Mork and Mindy. And I don't know if this is true or not, but I've been saying it for so long. I think I sold, because there were so many women who wanted to meet him after the show, I sold a vial of his urine for $500. It doesn't sound true, does it? It couldn't be true.
Well, what were you doing on the tour?
Well, Robin's first wife was somebody who was, for a short time, was my girlfriend in college. And she introduced Robin to my music. And he did 2 songs, This Heart is Closed for Alterations, and another song called Born to be Punished.
You're listening to Bullseye. I'm Jesse Thorn. I'm talking with Jonathan Katz. He created and starred in Comedy Central's Dr. Katz Professional Therapist. It's back now as an Audible series called Dr. Katz, The Audio Files. I mean, the two of you are an odd comic pairing. I mean, aesthetically,
Yeah.
Robin Williams may be the most legendarily manic stand-up comic ever, and you essentially the opposite of that.
I'm very still, but he's something that I'm not. He's a really generous laugher. Sometimes I would make a joke and he would turn it into 20 minutes. And this is just socially. He seemed like he had only 2 speeds socially, was manic and then kind of sad and introverted. I don't know, did you ever get to hang out with him?
I never hung out with him. I did meet him once, and it was under odd circumstances. I was picking up another comic from his house, and I got a full kind of averted gaze, sad and lonely interaction with him.
Okay.
Why do you think you are not a generous laugher? Because there's this myth, there's this idea that comedians never laugh at jokes, and in my experience, it's a real mixed bag. A lot of comedians love to laugh at jokes.
And their own jokes.
Sure.
As well. But when I used to hung out with Gary Shandling for a while in Los Angeles, and he said to me, Jonathan, every time you laugh, it sounds like you've been shot. No, I don't know why I don't laugh at other people's jokes. I think because part of my mind is engaged in topping them or working on my own joke to follow theirs.
I want to play a beautiful scene from the animated television show of Dr. Katz. This was my producer Kevin's all-time favorite Dr. Katz scene. It's you talking with John Benjamin, who played your son, Ben. And the two of you are in your house eating some rice for dinner.
The rice, you have really outdone yourself. The rice is great.
Oh, thanks, man. That you know what? That means a lot to me.
Dad, the rice is perfect. I mean, it's moist. Yeah. It's perfectly cooked. You timed it right.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so tender, but it's not mushy. Right. It yields to the bite, but not without a little struggle. I mean, you got to still open your mouth and chew it. It's not that it just goes right in.
Well, it's not going to bite itself, Ben.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Yeah. But thanks for the compliment, Ben. That means so much to me when you just take the time to notice, really. And I'm not a great cook, you know that. But
No.
But I'll let you in a little trick.
Mm-hmm.
You're not cooking a bunch of individual grains. You're cooking the rice. It really works if you think of it. I'm going to cook the rice. Your maternal grandmother told me that before she died.
I think Dr. Katz may be the single lowest stakes television program in the history of the medium. Almost exclusively composed. of either you and John Benjamin or you and Laura Silverman talking about essentially zero, just nothing of any consequence at all.
Well, my favorite scene is one where Ben and I confessing to each other that we both have dreams about killing each other. And he feels badly about it, and I tell him not to feel badly about it, just to embrace it, And I asked him if he's thought about how he would kill me, and he says, the first time? He made me laugh out loud a lot, John Benjamin, because he would come at comedy from a totally different direction than me. He didn't tell jokes or write jokes. He just said funny things and surprising things to me.
It's Bullseye. I'm Jesse Thorn. My guest is Jonathan Katz. His latest work is an audio show called Dr. Katz, The Audio Files. It's out now on Audible. I want to play a clip from Ray Romano on the show.
Right after I got married, I found out that in the middle of the night, I was now the automatic noise checker-outer. Every little thing. What was that? No, it's nothing. No, check it out. Check it out. What do you mean, nothing? That could be a burglar with a gun. So be careful. Go. Watch out. Put your slippers on. Might have to run. Bring me up a yogurt if it's nothing. Either way. I want a yogurt either way. Don't come back without a yogurt, slipper boy.
Oh, so you're
I'm the noise checker.
There is something magical about somebody who really got that format. And it's about, stand-up is such a performative thing, but one of the things that you're performing is intimacy. And Dr. Katz was about that intimacy. The question is, can somebody come in and talk to you like a person while they're doing the material from their act? And some people were exceptionally good at that, like Ray Romano.
And the other thing I have to add is that I very often, when it worked best, I wasn't actually talking. I wasn't in the booth with him because I would just bring him down. As a therapist, I took my role so literally that I made one woman cry and I made one guy feel better.
That's net zero.
Yeah. But what we discovered, I think it was Ray who helped us realize this, it was better for me not to be in the booth with him, but to drop in my lines after the fact. I didn't want to mess with his flow as a comedian. What I really wanted was his comedy.
I want to play another clip from the new audio version of Dr. Katz, The Audio Files. And Sarah Silverman is a guest on the first episode, at least it's the first episode that I heard. And she is kind of avoiding talking about her own personal issues, and you call her out on that, Jonathan, and she ends up somehow talking about Coco the gorilla that uses sign language.
No, I just sense your reluctance to talk about anything of a personal nature, which is so defeats the whole purpose of therapy.
No, I have so many personal things I want to work out with you. One, why don't they teach that ape Coco? How come she's never around other gorillas, and why don't they teach them sign language? And then we can communicate between all the gorillas and the people. That's been weighing on me. Why isn't Coco now teaching the rest of the apes sign language? Every generation of apes from when they're a baby, and then we can all speak sign language with each other.
I think that would be wonderful, Sarah, but...
Not only that, but why aren't they doing it? It's like, why doesn't Trump release his taxes? Like, why do they not want to have mass communication between the apes and the humans?
I'll be frank. I love all Coco the gorilla related humor.
Yeah,
but too. That particularly.
She's cunning, Sarah Silverman. Really cunning as a comedian.
When did you first have symptoms of multiple sclerosis?
I had the classic presentation called the Lermite, named after a Dr. Lermite, a French doctor, which is you put your chin to your chest and you start speaking French. No, you feel like it's almost like an electric sensation in your spine. That was my first presentation, and then there was numbness in my hands, numbness on my lip, of all places. It's a really sci-fi disease, MS. One of the things they've discovered in recent years is that the closer you live to the equator, the less likely you are to develop MS. And simply by raising the equator as little as 500 miles, we could reduce the incidence of MS by 32%.
Did you think when you were diagnosed that you had better keep it quiet because it could affect your life and career?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, my manager at the time and my lawyer at the time said to me, in LA, you're not allowed to be sick or old. So I moved back to Boston where both things are encouraged. No, it is very... A lot of people don't disclose their condition because they're afraid of being fired. And oddly enough, you can't really be accommodated without disclosing your condition. So it's sort of a trap.
When did you decide to talk about it?
Well, first of all, for a few years, I was getting paid to talk about it. I was getting paid by a pharmaceutical company, and that is kind of embarrassing because I'm not a big fan of those guys. But the difference between doing that and doing stand-up is that you're performing in a hotel in the daytime, which is bad. Comedy is not meant to be heard in the daytime.
It seems to me like part of the challenge of living with MS, for a comic particularly, is that a comic has a uniquely, a comic is a traveling entertainer. That's how you make your living. I would imagine that part of the challenge is that you can't control your environment in the same way that you might be able to if you worked in an office and lived in your house full time, because you're just not in an office or a house. You're in a club and you never know what it's going to be like, or you're in a theater and you never know what it's going to be like, or you're in a hotel and you don't know what it's going to be like.
Well, you know what's tricky when I ask people who run the theater if it's accessible? They'll say sure, but they're thinking about the audience. They're not thinking about the performer. So I have to worry about getting on stage, getting off stage. That's a whole different thing.
Do you find that the audience reacts to you differently?
No. I think they're surprised. If they haven't seen me, if they've never seen me, it's not a problem. But if they haven't seen me for years, they're often surprised by how my physical condition has changed. When I was first diagnosed, my wife and I went to see a neurologist in Boston. And I was 49 years old, and I said to the guy, what do guys my age do when they're diagnosed with MS? And he said, some guys have 10 affairs and some guys climb Mount Everest. So we talked it over, my wife and I.
I imagine that one of the nice things about the all MS version of your act that you were performing for on behalf of a pharmaceutical company is that
right.
You don't have to follow Dom Irrera. You can follow a guy who knows a lot about nerve structures.
I followed 2 neurologists. It was heaven. One would have been fine, but 2 neurologists. This audience was so ready for me.
Are there jokes about MS that you could do in an audience full of whatever neurology professionals that you could never do in your act, but that you're particularly proud of?
Well, I guess I asked my neurologist. Oh, my neurologist told me you have to cut down on 3 things: no more salt, no more alcohol. And I said, what about sex? He said, I'm seeing someone. But that's just a joke. It's only a joke.
Does your wife ever get tired of your jokes?
Oh, yes. Yes, she's getting tired right now. I can see her. In fact, she finds my voice so soothing, she's never been able to stay awake for an episode of Dr. Katz.
Did you feel like you should be more of that pushed up sport coat sleeves comedian, or more of the I'll tell you some fundamental truths about me and my life, comedian, when you were a relatively new comic in the 80s?
Do I only get two choices?
Well, I mean, only
those two brands of comedians?
Those were 80% of what was going in the comedy boom in the 1980s. And I'm just picturing you walking up on stage and talking very slowly.
Well, I first of all, I had a guitar I was leaning on, and I didn't play it. It was all pre-recorded stuff in my guitar. So that was like, I used that as a crutch. I would say things like, I've been called the White Paul Simon. That was my first joke, I think. And then I talked about the birth of my daughter for about 6 years. I said how wonderful it is to be there to witness the birth of your own child, to see the stork penetrate the uterus. Unbelievable.
It's a stupid joke.
It's pretty stupid.
Well, Jonathan, we're out of time, but I'm very, very happy to have had you back on the show. It's always great to get to talk to you.
Well, when you say we're out of time, do you mean both of us?
Yeah, the Grim Reaper's coming for all of us, buddy.
Oh, because I can go on for another 8 minutes.
Jonathan Katz, you can find his new series on Audible now. It's called Dr. Katz, The Audio Files. If you haven't seen it, go watch Dr. Katz Professional Therapist. There's a bunch of episodes on YouTube. You can buy it on DVD. Amazon even has a couple of seasons on VHS, if that's your pleasure. My mother-in-law's got some. She'll probably sell them to you. We bought them for her because she's a therapist, but she's not really into it.